Hi, it's the 4th of July today, and I just pulled out some of my old Carson McCullers stuff. I've got the replica edition of The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and this old record album where she herself narrates some of her books, including the first chapter of The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. I thought I would spend this evening thinking and talking about some of the characters in the book, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. I'm sure if you want to know about the book, I believe it was a novel from 1940. You can find it in Wikipedia. It was published when Carson McCullers was just 23 years old. And I'm a writer myself, and I find this book is an amazing model for the structure of a book, especially if you're interested in multiple characters who have separate stories but yet are connected in some way. And this is opposed to everybody's first initial novel, which is usually a linear story or a memoir of their cancer struggle, or something about how they're a wonderful person and they're a victim of every other mean person. If you want to go more complex, you might think of multiple characters, multiple flawed characters, all surrounding a theme. So I just wanted to quickly talk about each of the characters here. First, we have John Singer. John Singer is a deaf mute. I don't know what the politically correct term these days for that is. And in the book, he serves as a sort of unifying factor for the other characters. He cannot speak back to the people who come to him to commiserate. However, each of the main characters who comes to him to pour out their feelings, they believe that he understands them. But as the reader, I think we realize he doesn't really connect with them, and none of these characters connect together. It's like how we are in life, I think. We're all kind of together, but yet we're apart. And we can be very close together in a city, apartment by apartment, and yet we live very, very disconnected lives with each other. And that's what the structure of this book really highlights. So the John Singer character has a very sad ending. At the end of the book, he gets rid of himself, and again, each of the characters interprets this in their own, from their own perspective. And we see how everybody's viewpoint is kind of not correct, but also true, in terms of how each person perceives reality. It makes sense to them, and yet there's probably no universal truth to what's going on. So the most notable character, though, in the book is Mick. Mick Kelly, thought of as a stand-in for the author, Carson McCullers herself. Mick is a young girl, and the book goes through the story of her from a young girl to sort of becoming a woman. And they live in the small town, poor family. The family's house, they run a boarding house, which was a big thing maybe in the 1930s, 40s, and before. I think it disappeared for a while, but I think these days we hear again about a lot of people renting out all the bedrooms of their house for extra money. So Mick Kelly, as a young girl, she has a lot of quixotic dreams. She thinks about being a musician, and there's great scenes of sort of the yearning of youth that anybody can anybody can identify with. For instance, there's a house under construction, and she goes up and sits up on the roof and looks up over the town and sees all the houses. And everybody can identify with that. When you look out from a vista and see all the houses and the lives, just like all the lives out there now with their firecrackers and each little individual family that we're up right close to, but we don't know anything about. And that amazing feeling that we feel and that Mick Kelly felt when she's sitting up on the roof of the house. And there may not be anything ultimately profound about it. It's just we realize all the insignificant lives just like ourselves, and at the same time realize that each of those insignificant lives to themselves are the whole world. They are the epic beginning and end of time, because our lives are really what we have. So we go through her story. Another incredibly evocative scene where she's holding supposed to be a grown-up party, and then some younger kids come in and try to mess it up, and another whole thing where she goes off to the lake with this boy, and untoward things happen, and finally at the end she sort of grows up a bit, and we see in the end of the book that Mick is abandoning her dreams, and they had a piano, and I think she either sold or got rid of the piano that she was practicing on, and she's taken a job in a department store, and she kind of begins to forget about the wonder and the dreams that she had as a kid. And I suppose it's sort of sad, but it's also what all of us go through. Eventually we grow up and we have to make compromises. Another character here is Biff Brannon. Now all these characters, they're checkerboarded chapter by chapter in the story. So you go back and forth between these stories, and they're kind of all together but separate, as I said. And the other interesting thing is, of these main characters I'm going to talk about in the story, I've read this book every few years since I was in high school, and each time a different character stood out to me because of where I was in my life, and maybe the things I learned, and then the things I could identify with, or that I could even realize I could identify with. And this would be something we could think about when we write characters and people that could encompass the whole of human experience, because it's quite amazing that Carson McCullers could put all this together at 23, or even a little before that when she wrote the book. And I think that's what we all have to do, not just imagine ourselves or what we know, as they often say. Try to stretch your mind to all of humanity. After all, of course, the person who comes to mind is Shakespeare. It's presumptuous for anybody to want to be Shakespeare, but you got to have your dreams, and he's a person who, by all stories, by all rights, he was just an everyday playwright, but yet his characters encompassed the entire swath, the whole breadth of human experience. So, okay, next character, I said Biff Brannon. He's a shop owner. He has the experience of losing his wife. His wife passes away to illness, and he's there at this shop owner, this cafe where all the other characters come, and he observes them, sees them through his own mind's eye, and only later, as the story develops, does he recognizes how much he lost when he lost his wife, because he had his wife, they were together, but they were kind of distant and used to each other, and the whole trial of her illness was taxing, and when she was gone, I guess it seems like he was sort of relieved, and only later does he realize how much is lost when a person loses their life. And at the very end of the book, he actually observes Mick Kelly, the little girl character, who's the other character I just described, sitting there at the counter, and he sort of sees her attractiveness as a young woman for the first time because she's grown up. But then he just maybe doesn't want the trouble. He does nothing. He just observes that, and nothing happens. No plot point. Or perhaps you would say the plot point of, instead of two people getting together, is one person realizing maybe it's not worth the trouble after all. So this is indicative of really the themes of the book, in that we have loneliness, longing. It's not a critical, horrifying situation usually in these characters. It's portrayed sort of as the state of humanity, that we are separate and we do have longing and loneliness, that we can never really connect to other people. Next character we have is Dr. Copeland. He is a black guy who's a doctor, and this is way back in the 20s. So he's sort of a special elite person of the time, and he's very committed to social change. And he's named his kids after famous revolutionaries because he's hoped that he that he can instill in them the same fervor of revolution, because he's raised himself up to be a doctor, and he sees how much hatred and prejudice there is against his people. However, the next generation after him, his kids, they're not at all interested in revolutionary change or the pursuit of very high career goals, such as Dr. Copeland has achieved. And at various times in the book, Dr. Copeland has to stand up against injustice, and in almost every case, he's like beaten up for it. And eventually, he also has a terrible temper because of this, and eventually at the end, he becomes old and infirm, and he's put away in an old folks' home. And I think we can also see something like this as a terrible tragedy of man, but also probably the way most people who try to do something with their lives, we all try to do something. Maybe 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 can really do something, and the others end up frail and in the old folks' home. It's just a condition of humanity. And finally, the last character is Jake Blount. He is a labor activist who's, I suppose his main character is he's a terrible alcoholic. He's also a character who's really defined by a yearning to reach out, to connect with others who have a revolutionary zeal. He, sort of like Dr. Copeland, Jake Blount sees the injustice that the worker has to endure in the 1920s. And there's one scene where he paints a revolutionary slogan on the wall of a fence in just a last-ditch yearning effort to connect with people he can never connect with. He has the desire and the ambition for change, but yet he is a frail alcoholic human, and he can't really connect. I have to, the list of characters, to refresh my memory, I got off of Wikipedia, and I just, the Wikipedia write-up for this book is so terrible. It has all these quotes from academics who say the book has something to do with the state of democracy in America, and this sort of thing. The character descriptions are just terrible, and it reminds me how, especially young people now who really think they understand, or they're at the pinnacle of understanding the right way to do everything, the right upstanding moral posture. In that leads you to, when you review something, very often your review says more about the time and place right now rather than the thing that's being reviewed. Because I really think The Heart is a Lonely Hunter is not connected to the democratic polarization of the moment in the United States, or shouldn't be read as that. It is a document of yearning for all time. And let's see if I can read any of the notes in this light here I put here. Well, maybe I'll just end up by again saying we can study a book like this in its structure, in the way it goes back and forth between these 4 or 5 main characters, and how it interweaves these stories, all people in the same town, together, that occasionally meet but can never connect. And we can use that to create a more complex narrative, challenge ourselves to make a more complex narrative in our own writing. So anyway, thanks for enjoying this 4th of July with me and with Carson McCullers. The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. If you haven't read it, I would urge you to read it. It is very worthwhile. Bye-bye.